Shalom, friends. Welcome to the Shiur in Tanya, the Sefer Shel Beinonim, the book for the average man, written by the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, in the 18th century, the first Rebbe of the Chabad movement. I'm Eliyahu Sher from Chesed Ve'emet. My site is www.lovingkindness.co, and we're up to chapter 22. I'm not going to give the full introduction that I've been giving in the past few shiurim. Please go and take a look and listen to all of those previous shiurim. We're actually in the middle of a section that's dealing with the concept of identifying God's connection in the world and how that ultimately goes back to the first two of the 10 commandments and the 10 commandments in general, and ultimately all 613 mitzvot. Now, the point that we got to in the end of the previous chapter is how it is that God has speech and we also have speech. But the difference between the speech of God and our speech is that when God speaks, his words are still united with him, even though he has spoken the words. Whereas when we speak, our words leave us and seem to take on an entity all of their own. There is if there's something in their own existence. But with God, when he speaks out something, for example, he says, Yehi or, let there be light, it is not just that the light comes into existence and God disappears, but rather the words that he says from his mouth, so to speak, are still connected to him, as if in the same way we connect with our words before we say the words. Nevertheless, in chapter 22, the Alter Rebbe is coming to teach us that even though it is that our speech is of a different level, we need to still understand what is the connection between God's speech and our speech. Because if we say that God speaks, and indeed God uses terms in order to help us understand how he operates the world, and he says speech, therefore what is speech to him in comparison to our speech? There must be some sort of similarity. We began chapter 22 last week, but I'm going to read the first few lines again so that we can start right from the beginning of the chapter and not lose out. Rak she'ha-Torah dibra keloshen bnei adam. It is just that the Torah speaks in the language of people. And that is the reason why we see all the time that the Torah says, and God took us out of Egypt with an outstretched arm, or God appeared to the Jewish people or the Egyptians like a warrior at the time of the Yam Suf, when the Egyptians were being drowned. God appeared to the Jewish people and the Egyptians as a warrior fighting against the Egyptians. Whatever it is that we speak about when we say, and God sees something, and God hears something, and God speaks something, the Torah uses this language not because God actually has a mouth, or because God has ears, or because God actually looks like a warrior, or God really gets angry, or God really gets jealous. But rather, the term is there just to describe to us the idea that it is there to help us understand relative to ourselves what it is that God is experiencing or behaving as, so that we can understand his interaction into the world. V'nikra b'Torah diburo shel makom baruch hu b'shem dibur mamash. And so therefore, the Torah calls the speech of Hashem, blessed is he, by the name of speech, mamash. That's how the Torah says. Kedibur shel adam, just like the speech of a person. Lefi, since it is, shebe'emes kach hu derech yeridas v'hamshachas hachios letachtonim. Because this is exactly how it happens, that this is the path of the descent and the flow of life force to all the lower beings. The flow of life comes to us through the speech of God. When God speaks out that he wants something to happen in existence, he gives force to it so that the life of that thing comes into existence. As we described before, the way that God works is not like our way. That, for example, when a craftsman takes wood and he fashions the wood into a table or something, that all of a sudden when he leaves the table disappears. Rather, what happens is all that the craftsman does is he takes the raw wood and he changes its form into a new structure. And so whatever the structure is, if it was a plain piece of wood before, which has now been cut to look like a table or cut to look like a chair afterwards, it contains within it the new form of whatever the craftsman wanted to. And then when the craftsman leaves that particular creation, he can even die. And the creation will still continue to exist years and years, even after he has died. However, with God, God's word brings the very thing into existence and maintains it into existence, which means if God stops speaking, the life force of that thing will disappear, and as a result, that thing will disappear in itself, which is in itself the idea and the proof that all of existence is continually happening all the time, from moment to moment. God brings existence into its entity as we have it right now, because he's speaking all of creation into existence at every single moment. And how does this happen? B'tzimtzumim rabim va'atzumim. God does this through contractions, many and powerful contractions, minim shonim, many types which are very different. Lehibaros mehem bru'im rabim. And through all the contractions that God does, he creates many creations, many creatures are created. The more that God conceals himself, the lower the item appears to be, which means to say, the less God constricts himself, the more we can reveal God in that particular thing. The more God constricts himself and contracts himself, the less we were able to see that God is actually present. Minim shonim, all different types. V'kol kach gavru v'atzmu hatzimtzumim. And then what happens is that these contractions become so strong, v'heste panim ha'elyonim, and there is a hiding of the supernal face. Ad sheyuchlu lihitavotu lihibarot gam dvarim tmeim v'klipot v'sitra achra, until they can become about and they can come into existence to be created, even things which are impure, even the husks, the klipot, and the other side, even the most impure thing comes into existence because God brings it into existence. There are many people in the world who think such an idea of what I'm about to say. Many religions in the world think this type of thought about what I'm about to say, but this is not correct. There are no two beings. There is no God and Satan. There is only God. There is no Satan. When we speak about the idea of Satan, when we speak about an idea of an evil force, of evil, what we're speaking about is God's revelation in the world, which has been concealed. The more that God conceals himself, the more that evil has an opportunity to reveal itself. Why? Because for everything to have existence, God must bring that thing into existence through his speech. However, the more that he contracts himself, the darker the thing becomes, the more that we cannot see that God is there, until ultimately to such a degree that we can find in our presence a piece of tremendous evil that exists somewhere, and we can assume that God isn't even there. But God is there too, only he has contracted himself so much that we cannot perceive that he is actually there, that he is the life force that keeps that thing alive. And these negative forces, these evil forces, the Sitra Akra, the Klippa, all these evil things, they receive their life force and their existence, midvar Hashem, from the word of Hashem, v'ruach piv yisparach, and through the spirit of the wind of the mouth of God, beheste panim, through the means of a hidden face, v'yeridas hamadregot, and through the descent of many levels. So here's what God is doing. As he invests himself into the world, and that is exactly the process of tzimtzum. When God created the world, all of existence was God. And then what did God do? He removed himself. He contracted himself out of existence, so to speak. As a result of the contraction, there was an empty space that was created, a dark force. And it was into this dark force that God began to illuminate himself, so to speak, through a very thin line. And through this thin line, lights began to come out of the line in various ways, through the ears of this lion, of this human being that existed into a spiritual nature, through the ears and through the nose and through the mouth and through the eyes, as it began to manifest itself all in creation, through small apertures on the body, even through the holes, the openings of the hair, the follicles that exist in the hair as it comes out of the head. God is revealing himself through all the different apertures in different degrees of light. Now, as God begins to descend into the lower worlds, he begins to contract his light even more. So from the highest world in Atzilut, God is the most revealed. And then what does he do? He makes a separation between the world of Atzilut and the world of Bria, like a type of a blanket, a dark blanket. And when the light goes through the dark blanket, as it goes through and penetrates, the light becomes even darker. And then as we move to the world of Yetzirah, from Bria to Yetzirah, there is again like a darkened blanket. And as the light penetrates through, the light becomes even darker. And as it goes from Yetzirah to Asiya, again like a type of a dark blanket. And as a result, when the light goes through, it becomes even darker. And as we go into this world, there's a revelation of God getting darker and darker and darker, until ultimately, when we look at something evil, we imagine in our minds that this is Satan, this is another force of creation, but it is not another force. God's divine word is present in this particular force, giving it life. If it were not for God's force giving it life, it would have no existence. Yet to our eyes, it looks like evil. The reason that it is evil is because God is hidden. As God conceals himself more in nature, the more life looks like an aspect of evil. V'lachein, and therefore, nikra elokim acherim, and therefore all of these negative forces, this evil, they are called by the term of other gods. Why are they called other gods? The reason is that their suckling, their nurture, and their life force panim, do not come from the face of God, so to speak. Rather, they come from the back force, the Kedusha, of holiness. Everything in the world exists. The way that we look at ourselves as human beings is really just a stamp of how God has created the universe in accordance with the form that he has designed in the spiritual worlds. Just as it is that we also have a front to ourselves and a back to ourselves, so too in the spiritual worlds, there is also the concept of a front and the concept of a back. What exactly is the difference between a front and a back? The front is where the face reveals itself. The back is where there is no light. If somebody looks at another person at the back, he cannot perceive any life force in the person. When he looks at him in the front, he sees his eyes and he sees his mouth and he sees the person moving through his facial movements, and he knows that there is a life force. Now, when it comes to God in his aspect of giving, when he gives from the side of the panim, then the creatures that are created are creatures that have a life force in them that one can see godliness. But when the life force comes from God, so to speak, of the back side of God, from the other side of God, then we do not perceive godliness. This is why they are called Elokim Acherim, other gods, which means Elokim Acherim, the back side of God, because their nurture and their life force comes from not the aspect of the face, but it comes from the aspect of the backside of the Kedusha, of the holiness. And the explanation of the backside is ka'adam hanoisen davar l'son'o. It's like a person who gives something to his enemy. Shelo beratzon. He doesn't give it willfully. Shemashlicho lo kela'acha ktfo. That is like a person who sends it to him on the back of his shoulder. For example, if we have to give something to a person that we dislike, for example, a person went to court and the judge ruled that this person owes the other person a certain amount of money. So the person is forced to write out the check and give it to him. Does the person give him the check and say, "Thank you very much, you deserve this money, you have won this case, it's correctly so, and I'm giving you this money now, enjoy it"? He doesn't do that. Having forfeited so much money already, he takes the check and he throws it to the person. He says, "Pick up the check yourself. Do what you have to do. As far as I'm concerned, Don't think for a second that I'm giving you this check willfully, because when a person is an enemy, we don't want to give the person with our face shining to them and say, here it is, we're glad to give to you. This is exactly how God gives to these evil forces. He gives it on the back side of him, like a person passing something to his enemy over his shoulder. Ki machazir panav mimenu, he turns his face away from him, misinaso oto, because of his hatred towards him. Kach lemaila, so to everything that works in the physical way also works that way in the spiritual way. As it works in the spiritual, it works in the physical, of course. But when we imagine how it works physically, we understand also how it works spiritually. Beginnas panim, this aspect of the face, hu pnimis haratzon ha'elyon. This is the internal, supernal desire, v'chefzo ha'amiti, and it's the true desire that God has. Asher chofetz Hashem, that Hashem desires, lahashpiya chios lekol ha'karov elav, that he desires to give off life force to all those who are close to him, misitra to kedusha, on the side of holiness. Aval asitra akra, but on the side of evil, on the other side, v'hatuma, and the impurity, he to'avas Hashem asher sanei. This is an abomination to Hashem, and he hates it. God hates evil. That is why the evil is dark. That is why it appears to us that God is not present, because God hates the evil. But still God gives to the evil in order to sustain it. Why does he do that? Let us see. Ve'eno mashpia lachios mipnimis haratzon. God does not bestow to it a life force from the innerness of his will, v'chefzo amiti, and his true desire. Asher chofetz ba chas v'shalom, that he desires it, God forbid. God does not desire to give to the evil. We live in a world where we think that God is happy with the evil that exists. We see terrible things happening in the world. We say it must be that there's an evil God. God forbid. That is not exactly what is happening. But rather, there must be evil in the world for something to happen. And that's what the Tanya is going to tell us. But God does not desire the evil. And so what does he do? He gives to the evil on the back side of him. He throws to the evil, like throwing a bone to the dog, as if the dog is behind one and say, catch the bone and get on with your life already. Ki im command shade bata katfoi, like a person who's throwing it over his shoulder, lesono, to his enemy, shelo beritzono, without his desire. Rak kadei, and here is the reason. God does this only in order leha'anish es harushaim, to punish the wicked, v'litain schar tov l'tzadikim, and to give a good reward to the righteous. The akfiyan l'sitra akra, that they subjugate the other side. The way that the tzaddik works is the tzaddik says there is good and there is evil, or at least the Beinoni, at the very least. The Beinoni says that there is good and there is evil. And the Beinoni might not be able to involve himself in total goodness all the time, but there is something that he definitely has to work upon all the time, and that is called subjugating the evil. Iskafia, which means to say that when he sees the opportunity to engage in an evil act, he holds back. He pushes the evil away from him and he says, I will not do that particular thing. And God says to him, because you will not do that, I will grant you a reward, not in this world necessarily, but certainly in the next world. Of course, if there is no evil in this world, how will God reward the tzaddik? How will God reward the Beinoni if there is no evil? Only when there is free choice in the world can God grant a reward to those who choose the good in the free choice and give punishment to those who choose bad. God does not want anybody to choose bad, but he places the evil in the world as a test for us in order that we will stand a chance to push aside the evil and to go to the side of good. And for that, God will give reward to us. And here then is the purpose of this creation, that God set up this world as a testing ground for us, so that we will show that we desire to be close to God and earn a reward for the next world, ultimately. Therefore, this is the concept. God brings evil into the world by means of hiding himself, by means of giving to these forces in a way that their sustenance exists without anybody realizing that God is behind the sustenance inside the evil creation. V'hine, and behold, so v'zeh nikra bechinas achorayim, and this is called the aspect of the backside, the ratzon ha'elyon baruch hu, of the will of the supernal one, blessed is he. V'hine, and behold, ratzon ha'elyon, this supreme desire, the bechinas panim, which is an aspect of the face. As we know, when a person is talking to somebody and he loves him and he cares about him, he shows him his face. And it's a smiling face, and his eyes are glowing, and he's giving him the best that he can to express himself because he wants to give in the best possible manner. When a person loves another person and he gives him a gift, did you ever watch how the person gives the gift? He looks at him in the eyes, and he takes the gift and he says, with pleasure, and the eyes are shining, and he says, take this gift, I want you to have it. But when it's the enemy who requires, or who must be given the gift, inverted commas, the person throws it over his shoulder. He says, take what is yours. This is God's face. When he gives to us, the face is a glowing one, and we experience and see the godly force in this particular thing. Hu makor hachayim, this is the source of life. Hamachaye es kol haolamot, which gives life to all worlds. Ulefi she'eino shura klal ala sitra achra, and since it doesn't rest at all over the other side, meaning this evil, v'gam bechinas achorayim shel ratzon ha'elyon, and so too, this aspect of the backside of the supernal world, eino melubash b'toicha, is also not enclosed within it, mamash really, ela makif aleha, but rather it surrounds the evil, milamaila, from above. Lekach, therefore, he makom hamitah, it is the place of death, v'hatuma, and impurity. Hashem yishmerenu, God should guard us, which means to say that when it comes to this aspect of evil, there are two aspects, both in good and in evil. There is a light that is called or makif, which is an external light, and there is a light that is called or plimi, an internal light. Now, what's going on when it comes to good is that there's or makif that surrounds the good, which means that there's an external light, which is very powerful, and surrounds the person who's doing good, surrounds the good thing, everything is good. And then there is a light that goes into the person for the good that they're doing. God is rewarding the person with the light and life force that goes into him. However, for the Sitra Achra, the godly life force exists on the outside. However, when it comes to the inside, something else changes, which means the following. Ki ma'at mizer or v'chios sheyonekes umekabeles leseicha. Because a little bit, this little drop of light and life force that suckles and receives leseicha into it, mi bechinas achorayim de from the aspect of the backside of holiness, shelamala, which is from above, hu bechinas galus mamash betocha. It exists in a realm of exile within it, in reality, which means to say that what happens is even the life force of God that enters into the Sitra Achra, and it exists there, the Klippa says, I will have a hold over the godly life force. I will not allow the godly life force to express itself, and as a result, the life force of God and goodness is held captive in exile within the realm of evil. Besod galus hashchina hanal. And this is the secret of the exile of the Shekhinah, as we mentioned above. This is a very deep concept in all the learnings of mysticism that we come across, which is known as the exile of the Shekhinah. At this point in time, certainly that there is no Beis HaMikdash, the Shekhinah is in exile. The Shekhinah is looking for a home. Where will the Shekhinah find a home for herself? When we study Torah, the Shekhinah finds a home for herself. When we involve ourselves in mitzvah performance, the Shekhinah finds a home for herself. However, when we perform an Aveira, God forbid, at that point in time, the Shekhinah has no home. And therefore she runs about or flies about or moves about within a realm called Galut, of exile. V'lachein, and therefore, Nikre b'shem Elokim acherim, it is called by the name, all these evil forces are called by the name of other gods. Shehi, because it, Avodah zara mamash. It is real idolatry. Ukafira ba'achduso, and this negative force, this evil force, this idolatry, it actually it denies the unity shel melech malchei hamelachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. Those who have been paying attention to the storyline that is taking place have already got a part of the answer that we've been discussing all this time. We've been discussing this idea that God's presence is to be found in all of creation. When God speaks, the words that He speaks gives a life to the particular force that He is speaking the life force into existence. Now, the truth of the matter is that God is completely united with every force of creation, of every being in creation, through the speech that He says. The problem, however, is that when God hides Himself within this negative force, within the evil force, the evil takes the Shekhinah, bringing it into exile. And as a result of that, it looks like there is no God there. More than that, the evil force itself turns around, holding God captive, saying there is no God, saying there is no unity. And as a result, when we see something that is negative, we cannot believe that God is actually present over there. This is our danger, because when God says to us, don't commit this particular Aveira, and yet we do it, we think to ourselves that we have not separated ourselves from God for an instance, that God is still with us. But the reality is, even though God is with us, we cause a type of a separation. We cause God to go into the exile. And as a result, we cannot feel God's presence. We literally separate ourselves from God, even though it is that God never separates Himself from ourselves. That since it is that the light and the life force of holiness, it is in the aspect of exile inside it. It is not nullified at all next to the holiness of the Holy One, blessed be He. V'adarabba, on the contrary, Magbia atzma, the evil force lifts itself up with chutzpah, kenesher, like an eagle. Lomar, what does the evil force say? Ani ve'efsi od, I am existence, and except for me, there is nothing else. Many people might come across such individuals, never mind the source of evil as it exists in creation. Many people know such individuals. When people talk and they say, I'm it. I have achieved all the things in life, all through myself. It is me and no other person and no other being has helped me to achieve these goals. I am a billionaire and I'm a self-made billionaire. I did it with nothing, no resources. I had only $1 to my name. And then afterwards, I built up the successful business. I did it. And there is nothing else but me. This is the klipa. This is the sitra akra, the evil force that claims that it is its own existence and nothing else exists except for it. But as we learned before, nothing in creation exists without the power of God's word bringing it into being. A person is only able to see with his eyes if he can see and has that blessing. A person can only hear with his ears if he can hear because he has that blessing. A person can only move his body, his arms, if he can move his arms. A person can only think with his head and his brain if he has a brain, because God gives him that ability to think like he should, to be able to move like he should, to see like he should, to hear like he can hear. God forbids that the person deny it. And he used such an expression against God. Ani ve'efsi od. I am it. And there is nothing else but me. There is no godliness. Only a person who's completely immersed in the muck and the evil, where the concealment of God exists to the highest degree, can make such a statement. Ukumama. And as the saying goes, as Paro would say, Yo'or li, the Nile is mine, said Pharaoh, the ultimate, most dirty character of all evil in the world of the Klippah. Pharaoh is the ultimate evil that can exist, because this is what he says. Yo'or li, the Nile is mine, v'ani asisani, and I have made myself, says Pharaoh. I have made myself, and the Nile is mine. If anybody would think that I have a mother and a father, let them be warned, says Pharaoh. I have no mother or father. I created myself, he says. And that Nile River, it is mine, meaning not just that I paid money for it as if it's my property, but it's mine. It's actually mine. I made it. It's me. It's who I am. This is the ultimate klippah that exists in the world, the ultimate form of evil that says there is nothing of a nature of godliness in the world because it is me that has achieved all of this. This is God in a state of absolute exile with the inability to free himself. He is stuck within the klippah, unable to get out. And therefore, Amru Razal, our rabbis have said, Shegasos haruach shekula ka'avodah zorah, that a person who has pride, he should know that pride is the equivalent of avodah zorah, of idolatry. A person who is a proud person is like a person who worships idols on every level. Well, of course, ultimately, who does he worship? If we want to say that he worships anything, he worships himself. It's the ultimate avodah zorah. I'm in charge. I don't need anybody to tell me what to do. I don't need a God to tell me to keep kosher. I don't need a God to tell me any mitzvahs of the Torah. It's Shabbos. It's the laws of family purity, charity. A God should tell me to give charity. Who is he to tell me what to do with the money that I earned? No. This is the ultimate avodah zorah. The moment a person has pride in himself, at that point in time, he is filled with avodah zorah, of idolatry. He is fulfilling the aveira of idolatry. Mamash, really. Ki ikar v'shorish avodah zorah, because the essence and the roots of idolatry, hu ma shenekshav ledavar bifnei atzmo, is when something thinks of itself as if it has independent existence. Nifrad mikadusha social makom, as if he is separated from the holiness of God. V'lo kafire b'Hashem legamre, and it's not a complete denial of Hashem completely. Kedeisa b'Gemara, as we say in the Gemara, i.e., with regards to these forces of evil, dekaru le elaha delaya, that they call God the God of all gods. The evil forces, the sitra akra, this Yetzer Hara, the Satan, call him whatever you want to call him, these negative forces and evil forces of creation, they know that there is God because they call him the God of gods. What does that mean? We are gods. We are gods, but we call him the God of gods. You know, like we speak about Lahabdil, we say he's the rabbi's rabbi. What we mean to say is that everybody's a rabbi, but you know, they need more education still. They need to learn certain things. So they go to the rabbi who's higher and they ask him for certain questions that they need help in. Lahavdil, on the other side, you have these forces of evil. And they know that God exists. They know they get their energy, they get their life force from God. But as far as they're concerned, they talk about themselves as being gods themselves. And therefore, they're not prepared to actually listen to the desire of God. They know that he exists, but they don't want to listen to him because as far as they're concerned, they're the gods themselves, and he happens to be the God of all gods. We know that he exists. We'll stop over here. There's a semicolon over here. And so it's a good place to pause before we get into the next part of the sentence and find that we're cut off. Thank you very much for joining me. We're going to continue this theme of how God has really invested himself in the evil, and at the same time he's present in every single bit of creation. And we have to start understanding this concept so that whenever we see a concept of evil, we know that God is there also, and ultimately to realize that God is present in everything that we're involved in. And therefore, ultimately, when God gives us a mitzvah and we refuse to perform it, we should know that we are separating ourselves from God. That is initially where we began our discussion and how this whole theme is going to play out as we continue to understanding how to connect with God ultimately in every single mitzvah and how to hold ourselves back, that when we see that there's an opportunity to commit an aveira, we say to ourselves, we will not go there, because we know that by doing so, we will separate ourselves from God, just like this klippah, just like this Yetzer Hara and the Sitra Akra that separate themselves from God in their behavior. Thanks very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Shir from Chesed Ve'emet, broadcasting from the holy city of Yerushalayim. You can find my site on www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed this shiur, please like this video, share it with friends and family. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button to be notified of future shiurim. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop a comment in the comment section below, or alternatively to send me an email. I would be delighted to be in touch with you and discuss any matters of Torah and life that you might have on your mind. These are things that appeal to me the most, things about growth and life activities. I look forward to another shiur with you, and as always, I invite you to become a part of the activities that we're involved in Chesed Ve'emet. Become a partner, help support us in our activities so that we'll be able to do more and produce more and hopefully reach an even bigger reach of people in everything that we're doing. So I look forward to another shiur and of seeing you in the near future, and I wish you everything of the best. Shalom, shalom, bye-bye.